evening, Assalamu alaikum, hello, hola, namaskar. At BostonIICA, we bring to you Livewire on very interesting topics, leadership discussions, interviews, brainstorming sessions. At BostonIICA, we believe in unleashing your talents. So today we're going to present to you a very, very interesting topic from a very, very different perspective and dimension called succession to success. And this topic we will break down into three parts, part 1, part 2, and part 3. In part 1, we lay the foundation of succession, how it was, what was the origination, and where we stand today. And the part 2, we will learn about how to plan and strategize and how to execute the succession plan or succession strategy. Now we are calling it as a succession loop strategy. And then part 3, we're going to present to you how you're going to continuously improve your succession loop strategy so that it remains fresh and it is continuously aligned with the business strategy. Now let's start today with a very, very heart-wrenching story of a succession plan, of a succession strategy. The story is about the death of an irreplaceable CEO successor. This was in the year 2000 and 2005 and 6, and this is a live case about one of the mega hotel group, which has been well documented in the Wall Street Journal. And a lot of lesson has been derived from this live case study. And as a result of this incident, a lot of organizations, they launched in a massive way succession plan, succession strategy, and especially the family-run businesses, and especially those people who were making their son follow their footstep to become the next chairman and the CEO. As I said, this is about a big hotel group named Kerzner International Limited. And Kerzner operates luxury hotels with properties in Mexico, Maldives, Mauritius, and many other locations. And they're headquartered in Bahamas, founded in 1993 as a Sun International Hotels Limited. In 2005 alone, their annual revenue was $745.7 million. The executive chairman and the founder, Solomon, lovingly called Sol Kerzner, was that time 70 years old. And he had handpicked his son as successor. His name was Howard Butch Kerzner, age 14. And he was a phenomenal guy. And everybody was looking up to him, and he was one of the dynamic guy, and he had that vision, and he wanted to get into the shoes of his father, and he wanted to drive his hotel business, and they were looking to make this hotel crossing $1 billion in a very, very short time. And his leadership future had been planned very, very meticulously, and everything was looking excellent and phenomenal for Kerzner International. The aging and sometimes embattled chairman and the founder had appointed this popular and talented son Butch to be his successor. The elder Kerzner was planning on easing into a retirement mode, like every chairman and the founder. Unfortunately, tragedy struck when Butch was killed in a helicopter crash while surveying sites for a new luxury hotel in the Dominican Republic on October 2016. Shortly after Butch's death, Kerzner received word that a proposal for an integrated resort in Singapore, which was being championed by his son, had been rejected by the Singapore government. This was the vital project for the company's future. And it suddenly vanished. On top of it all, the company was and company was aging. The company again faced a huge leadership crisis, and now they had to call these aging founder back to fill up the shoes of the CEOs. And the father had to again join back the company, and he brought in another CEO called Paul O'Neill, who was 60 years old at that time. And the elder Krasner was coaxed out of his retirement to fill in this leadership void left by the Bush death. Now, there is a lot of learning. This is an extremely heart-wrenching story of a very, very promising CEO who was about to enter his father's shoes. Now, a lot of lesson could be learned from it, especially for those organizations who are still saying, hey guys, succession plan is, or succession strategy is not for us right now. Now, what this illustrates, the potential problem of investing all development of efforts in a single successor, no matter how talented the person is. Whereas you need to focus on developing a leadership pipeline that spans horizontally and laterally. The ability to jumpstart or activate the succession process when there is a crisis, it should be seamless. And succession surprises are not limited to the sudden departure of the incumbent CEO. It can happen in any kind of a crisis can happen. Now, let's see another statement from one of the very, very prominent figure in the GE. His name was Steve Kerr, and before joining Goldman Sachs, Steve Kerr was a prominent figure running the GE's legendary Management Development Institute at Canterville. And probably Canterville Institute is the world's first major corporate university. And this was during the Jack Welch time. And Kerr argues that intensive employee development is a huge competitive advantage in terms of recruitment as well as retention. In addition to the building the leadership capacity, needless to say, in the competitive world of today's business environment, it is regardless of your industry, sector, or any kind of any field. Now, let's see some of the interesting fallacies. There are very, very interesting 5 fallacies are there for whenever the board or a CEO or the HR that discuss about the succession plan or a succession strategy. Number 1, most companies, they feel that the succession plan is only for the big corporations. Succession plan is never ever limited to the larger or bigger corporation. It is needed for the organization all across length and breadth, be it a large corporation, be it a mid-sized corporation, or be it a smaller firm, or be it in the political system, the higher apparent, the person who's going to take over the country or the political outfit. Everywhere you need a successor. You not only need a successor one, but you also need a successor pipelines or a talent pipeline for your successor. Number 2, most of the organizations, they say, no, this is not our time. No, we will do our succession plan and a succession strategy when the time comes. In today's turbulent and a volatile and a ruptured, disintegrated and uncertain times, one needs to be more getting to the more deeper into the succession plan. Number 3, succession is only for the CEO. And I've been in a lot of talks. I had a lot of discussion with a lot of chairmen, founders and all, and a lot of HR heads. most of the time they say that we need to have a successor for the CEO. Well, it's very good to have a successor for the CEO. What about the other business critical roles? What about the other operation critical roles? And you cannot have just one or two or person for the CEO talent pipeline in order to make your organization sustainable. You need to have a broad spectrum of talent pipeline which span the length and the breadth of the organization. And that should be the continuous process of weeding out and identifying your potential talent who could become the CEO in or who can take on these business critical and operation critical roles in times to come. Number 4, only HR is responsible. Well, this is interesting. I've seen a lot of head of HR and HR guys and business heads. Hey, this is not CEO's responsibility. This is not C-suite responsibility. This is not board of directors or shareholder responsibility. This is the HR initiative the HR must take on. Well, the day only HR takes on this initiative, I can tell you 100% it's going to bomb in next couple of months. And we're going to talk about this, that how do you initiate, how do you launch, how do you manage, how do you propose it to the CEO, how do you propose it to the board of directors, how do you make your CEO, the C-suite and the board of directors own the succession plan or succession strategy. But we are calling it the new concept of succession plan is called succession loop strategy. Now, the last fallacy, very interesting, is once we have implemented succession plan, finished, then our job is done. The succession plan is in place. It's going to take care of the aging, retiring, exiting leaders. Well, that's not the case. Succession strategy or succession plan or a succession loop strategy have to be continuously be reviewed quarterly, annually, and year after year. Now let's see when we have reached to a stage where we know these are the fallacies of succession plan. Let's see how this succession plan or succession strategy has evolved over a period of time. Now, succession plan started somewhere around in 1970s, and this was started as a replacement planning or a replacement plan. Unfortunately or fortunately, even today, some organization or some people they call, or I've seen some white papers as a succession plan as a replacement planning. No, succession plan is no more is going to be a replacement planning. That was a way before. And in 1970s, the focus was on very top roles, job specific requirements. It was based on individuals. It was based on individuals' experience and technical expertise. And what was the time scale of planning? Now we need it immediately. And what was the role of future leaders? To provide smooth continuity. Very interesting that time, because that was a period where it was a cradle to the grave. People were going into the job and then they're exiting, and the job was a way of life. You entering one job and exiting from the same job, or maximum 2 jobs you'll be changing in your lifetime. And who identifies these people? It is a judgment of CEO. CEO, the higher apparent. Okay, so it was usually the family-run businesses, very few corporations, and the higher apparent will say that these are the guys I need them to follow my footstep. What happens after the assessment? Yes, there were some assessments were there, not as advanced and as exhaustive as being done in today's time. and assessment used to be done. And then what after that? Wait. And people used to wait till the time there used to be a order, circular. And the most important thing, what about the transparency? Shh, it was top secret. Nobody did talk about it. Nobody did discuss about it. And this used to go on and on. And 1970s, from that, we came to 1980s. And there the word came succession plan or succession planning. What was the focus on? Range of leadership roles for the organization goal. For the first time, organization goals, corporate came into being, and the goals were defined and people were being aligned with the organization goals based on what kind of individuals with the experience and competencies. Now we're talking about experience and people's competencies, capabilities. And what was the time scale? The time scale was really short, 6 months to 12 months. And what was the role of the future leaders? Strategic planning, because the strategic planning had came into being and people were planning for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And how the people were, or potential people were identified. They were identified by the top team, the top leadership team. And what happens after the assessment? And after the assessment, people were pushed into leadership development courses. And interestingly, transparency, shh, it was still a secret. Only a few people had the knowledge of who's going to become a successor and who's going to be not a successor. This was causing a lot of heartburn and a lot of disgruntlement. Then came 2000. And 2000 onwards, it was called a succession management. And the focus now was on the pools of strong leadership team. From individual came to the team. And what it was based on the individuals? It was based on competencies that define potential for top leadership. And the timelines became very prolonged, 5 years to 10 years. And what happens after the assessment? After the assessment, a tailored development program, including job moves. It was the first time that the job movement had started, and people were developed and they were giving the different roles, and they were being prepared for the potential roles. And what happens after the assessment? What happens after the assessment? Then what about the transparency? And this was the first time that the organization, they've started sharing their feedback to the potential people, the potential candidates. Then came 2000. And in 2000, we are calling this era a succession loop strategy. In succession loop strategy in this time, the focus now is on individuals' expectations, which needs to be aligned with the business goals. We are talking about a different era, millennials and beyond. And it is now based on individuals' capabilities and drives. Now the timelines have shrunk now. It is 2 to 3 years and again looped into 2 to 3 years. And what is the role of future leaders? They are expected to be agile, resilient collaborators. And they are identified via individual aspirations. They are coached by line managers, mentored by the top management. And what happens after the assessment? After the assessment, they have been designed, each has been created a very, very custom-made program, and their expectations are being aligned with the organization goals. And from the transparent point of view, a lot has been improved. Organizations are becoming more and more transparent with the potential talent pools. There is a huge role clarity, that the timelines have been defined, they have been mentored, they have been coached by their line managers, supervisors, and at times by the CEOs and at times by the board of directors. Now, this is the huge change vis-a-vis what used to be the replacement plan, from replacement plan to succession plan to the succession management to the succession loop strategy. Now uh, let's see some of the very interesting facts about succession plan, and these are bone chilling truths. Number one, all CEOs will leave office one day or the other, or all the high potential peoples, all peoples holding the business critical and operation critical roles. Yet, research has long shown that the most organizations are still ill prepared to replace them. This is almost all organizations, except barring few organizations who are really working on for a succession plan to become successful, so that they have a continuous flow of critical talent pipeline for not only their C-suite and the CEO roles, but also for the business critical roles and for the operation critical roles. Number two, board aren't ready for succession. Each year, now this is a fact, each year 10% to 15% of the corporations must appoint a new CEO, whether because of executives, retirement, resignation, dismissal, or ill health. So you can see there's a huge chunk of gap which is emerging year after year. 2015 and beyond, the turnover of the global CEOs and the people who are holding the business critical and operation critical roles has gone to a 20-year high. Activist investors are increasingly forcing their leaders out, as they are thinking they are underperforming. Yet despite these trends, most of the boards are unprepared to replace underperforming chief executives or people holding the business critical roles or operation critical roles. The reason being, there is a huge lack of talent pipeline. Now, a 2010 survey by a search firm called Hedrick and Struggles and the Rock Centers for Corporate Governance at Stanford University revealed that 54% of the boards were grooming. 54% of the boards were grooming a specific successor, and 39% had no viable internal candidates who could immediately be replaced, which includes the CEO and the business critical roles if the need arises. 5. Organization's top executives is the one of the few variables over which boards have a total control, and their failure to plan for the CEO transition has a huge cost. A study of world's 2,500 largest public companies shows that companies that scramble to find replacement for departing CEO forego an average of staggering $1.5 billion in shareholders' value. That's a huge depletion on the wealth of the shareholders. Number 9, a separate study reveals that the longer it takes a company to name a new CEO during a succession crisis, the worse it subsequently performs relative to its peers. That's a huge damage to any organization, especially if it is a listed company. The weaning of the shareholders' wealth means the management and the board of directors have failed to own or to create this succession pipeline for all the leadership role, including the CEO. Finally, poor succession planning often extends the tenure of ineffective CEOs. This is very interesting, who end up lingering in office long after they should have been replaced. Because the board is ineffective, so the underperforming CEOs keeps on lingering and he continues to damage. I have seen the organization where the CEO was hired from one of the biggest brand name. He comes on board and no other place. It's in Middle East here, and he stays in the organization for almost 2 years, and he damages the entire culture of the organization. Why? Because he was one of the very, very poor fit. It took almost 6 to 7 months to 8 months to understand the culture, the tradition of the region, the country, the organization. And by the time he tried to take off, he met extreme resistance from all across. He did not know how to navigate. He was having a lot of collisions, and after 2 years being in that tenure, the board finally had to take courage to sack him. Now this is a real time story which has happened in the Middle East, because it happened because the organization did not have organic talent pipeline for CEOs and the business critical roles, including operation critical roles. Now, a study of Booz and Company found that on average, firms, so Booz and Company is not a booze company, it's Booz. A study of Booz and Company found that on average, firms with stock returns in lowest decile underperformed their industry peers by 45% points over a 2-year period, and yet the probability that the CEOs would be forced out was only 5.7%. They are underperforming, and still the probability of that CEO leaving or exiting the organization is 5.7. Understand, so pathetic situation for the organization that the company is underperforming, the CEO is lingering, and CEO is not being able to thrown out because you don't have a leadership pipeline in your organization. That's a very sad state of affairs. And we keep on saying, we don't need succession planning. We don't need succession strategy. The time is not for us. The time is for the bigger corporations. Well, it is for everyone. It is for large corporation. It is for mid-level corporation. It is for the smaller. Even for the family-run business, they must identify an organic talent pipeline. Otherwise, in today's volatile, ruptured, highly changing, dynamic world, your organization is going to collapse one day or the other. That's going to be extremely bad news for you, because you have not woken at the right time to create a succession plan which could have saved your organization in these times of crisis. Now, 12, the top roles. Most of the time, boards are giving underperforming CEO more latitude than might be expected. I don't understand this. 12, lack of preparedness is the only part of the problem. However, equal challenge is that all too often CEOs being replaced badly. Boards aren't finding the right man or a woman for the job. Estimates suggest that 40% of new CEO fail to meet performance expectations in the first 18 months. Planning takes years, not months. So what the directors do? They prepare for the succession events, but to ensure that they make a winning pick when the time comes, a first step is to integrate your executive development programs, create the pipeline, and you have to continuously work on providing that talent pipeline for not only the leadership role, but also for the business critical roles and also for the operation critical roles. University research at the Santa Clara University and Indiana University, who examined the track records of chief executives groomed at CEO factories, quote unquote, CEO factories, such as General Electric, IBM, Procter and Gamble, found that stock market reacted positively when they were appointed, and that they delivered superior operating performance over the 3 years. Researchers include that certain firms are efficient in developing leadership skills because they were able to expose executives to a broad variety of industries and help them develop skills that can be transferred to a different business environment. That's a big one. So the conclusion for today's part one is we have seen that how with a very heart-wrenching story about leading hotel that almost went into the bankruptcy, or you can say about to collapse their business because the hotel industry had only one successor, and that one, fortunately, he died. And then we have seen about how the GE, if you wanted to create a competitive advantage, created their university. Then we have seen how 5 fallacies they work for the people to take a decision on launching the succession plan. And then we have seen how the story of succession evolved from 1970s to 1980s, from 1970s to replacement plan, 1980s succession plan, 1990s succession management, and in 2020 we are calling it as a succession loop strategy. And we're going to learn and understand more about succession loop strategy, all about how you conceptualize the strategy, how you integrate the strategy into your business, how do you propose that strategy to the management, how you make the management own, how do you make the shareholders own, how do you make the board of directors own, and how do you make your C-suite leaders own the succession loop strategy, and how do you execute. How do you form the talent committee, review committee? How do you establish the assessment center? How do you establish the development center? And how do you implement, and how do you groom, and how do you retain this critical talent for you to sustain your organization in this volatile, ruptured, ever-changing business scenario of the world? In our part 2, we're going to discuss this. In our part 3, we are going to discuss about how do you continuously improve your succession loop strategy. We are not calling it succession planning. We are not calling it replacement planning. We are not calling it as succession management. We are calling it as a succession loop strategy. See you then in our next Livewire, which is going to be next week, and we're going to learn entire detail about succession loop strategy, implementation, execution, and monitoring. See you then. Assalamu alaikum. Hola. Have a good bye. Namaskar.